course.
Okay, Ryan, I'm taking note of that. Thank you very much. And by the way, if anybody else does that, that is a huge boost. I am trying to be really good and I totally forgot. Okay, good. We're recording it now. All right.
All right. So I think I went through all of the comments of the review so far.
Great, perfect. So Liam, do me a favor. Is there a link to is that online, the syllabus? So we can all look at it?
It's on B courses. I don't know how public that is.
No, it's not. Okay, so we can't look at this. It's actually, I think this is actually a very interesting example of a very well-written syllabus. And for a lot of the reasons you said. And so I want to actually study it more carefully. So I'll look at your homework submission. But I like it. I'm getting ideas from it. And I think especially, everyone, this is a good example of looking around. Peter is great. He's the chair of the department. So, he's a very seasoned instructor. So it's really good to learn from a positive example like that. Does anybody want to share another example of something on the other end of the spectrum? Maybe something that they feel that there's a lot of room for improvement in the syllabus. I got Stefano there. Stefano, you want to share with us again? We're not here to condemn anyone, and also what goes on in here stays in here pretty much. And I don't want anything to get back to any professors that we're critiquing them or anything like that. We're here to learn, and that's why we're just looking honestly at trying to understand how things could be improved. Okay.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I think it's also especially hard this year with them having to do so much more extra work, getting everything online. But yeah, this is the syllabus for the class I'm GSIing this semester. The class is supposed to be the kind of capstone lab class for material science and engineering. So I think it's been especially challenging to get that online and give that in a virtual format. So this is actually something I haven't encountered all too often in grad school or in undergrad, where the syllabus is on a PowerPoint slide that's at the beginning of the first lecture. I think that it has some pros and cons. The pro is that perhaps it offers a much more quicker overview of the important points of the syllabus. You can make it into like a bullet point format. A con is that it's not uploaded where you would think to find the syllabus under like B courses, but you have to know it's like in the beginning of the first lecture.
Okay. Go ahead.
Yeah. So that other thing I noticed is perhaps that it's not updated from previous years because the office hours for the installment of the instructor and sub record are still giving you like the room number instead of like the Zoom link that you might use to access the room that they're hosting for the office hours. So perhaps like more care could have been given there.
Okay, keep going.
Then it goes for 4 slides. Then it lists the GSIs here, but we hadn't decided on the office hours for the GSIs, so they're not listed on the syllabus, and I'm not sure that it can be changed at this point since it's part of the first lecture. So that's another disadvantage of having the syllabus be part of the first lecture slides. So. And then it goes on for another couple slides of just the first one mentioning like the grading policy and when things will have to be turned in. However, there is no like timeline or timetable for like when exactly or approximately the labs would be due, or like what each of the labs in our semester would be, like what the topics would be. And then the last one goes a little bit more into like the course material and how the lectures will be pre-recorded on Zoom. And then you can access them on B courses. However, it doesn't really list any like prerequisites or any of the topics that will be necessarily covered in class. So I found that lacking.
Great point. I mean, I'm glad you presented. That is a very, very sparse syllabus. It's basically just a few basic, ground rules. But, as you can see, contrasting the two, there's no sort of sense of, engagement with the students, how they should treat each other, how they behave, all these kind of things we've been talking about are completely absent here. It's just a very, very cursory. And if you go back to the second slide where it's interesting, you're the GSI, right? So they misspelled your name, and
me too.
Oh, they misspelled. Oh,
yeah.
Okay, great. Okay, so obviously it wasn't discussed with you, and office hours, right? So it would be much better to have done this in some format online, right? Or even put these slides online so you could edit them. So here's a question I want to ask you. How much interaction do you have with a professor?
Not much.
Okay.
Yeah, not much. I think there's like 3 instructors for this course. So it's still a little bit of a learning curve, I think, for them to like get this course online. So I think the interaction with the GSIs has kind of like fallen off to the wayside.
Yes.
I also want to comment on it.
Please.
Actually, we try to be really active to interact with the instructors, but I guess in principle, the instructor of record for this course is Professor Devine. As you can you go back to the previous slide? Yeah, it's Professor Thomas Devine. But according to the other instructor, I guess he's very busy recently. So actually, now it's Professor Shang who is doing the lectures and the labs. So we basically talk with Professor Shang and Dr. Kumai. But they said they didn't get improvements or any other information from Professor Devine. So they cannot give us, the final decision of some like the syllabus, like the office hours, or some other issue. So that's a weird conflict.
Yeah.
You understand?
Okay.
That?
No, you got a complicated situation there. I have to say.
Yeah.
You've got 3 instructors, and they're not necessarily all on the same page, and then you've got 3 GSIs not on this, who haven't been looped in, and that's not a good set of ingredients for a class. I mean, one thing that I would say is I think it wouldn't hurt for you, the 3 of you, to sit down together and write a very friendly professional note and mail it to the 3 instructors and say, we would like to sit down and do some have a meeting with you and talk a little bit about the course and how it could be streamlined or something. Don't make it sound like it's a disaster, but ask for a meeting and a Zoom meeting. I would definitely do that. And I think it is surprising if it hasn't happened already, but you can ask for it, and then maybe make a short list of things you would like to do that you think could be improved. Generally, I would guess the professors, I don't know them. I know Trizin pretty well, but I don't know the others. I would best bet that they would be pretty receptive. If these things are not, they may not have time to do a massive overhaul, of course, but I think if you said, here's some ideas I have for maybe we could improve this. And then, I think they'd be probably very grateful to you for doing that. So don't feel, this is actually a lesson I think is a great point, which is when you're teaching, don't feel that you're, in some way have to be silent and just on the receiving end, of these classes. I've had both kinds of GSIs over the years, and I like it when GSIs step in occasionally and they say, the way you taught that, it was a little confusing. Here's how another way you could do that. And I usually, that's very helpful, because they talk to the students, they see where their confusion is, they see things from a different perspective. And so it's really useful. And if someone came in with a suggestion about structure, I'd be open to that too. So think about that. And I think for everyone who's teaching a class, and whenever you are, if it's not, you don't want to be micromanaging, and you can't, unfortunately. There's some instructors who are very, very, resistant. But I think in this case, a nice, well thought out email asking for a meeting, and then with an agenda would be a great idea. And make your job, you'll enjoy it more if you have that opportunity. So think about it, no pressure, but thank you for sharing that. And again, we'll keep that confidential. I'm not gonna repeat it, but it is an interesting case. Here's the thing, the reality is, as you are all grad students know, is that everybody is super busy. And when they're trying to teach a class, certainly sometimes it comes up when there's a major conference deadline, they have funding, proposals to get in or reports to write or who knows. And so faculty don't always get enough time to pay attention. And give them the benefit of the doubt. It's not that they're lazy, but they're just busy with things. So if they didn't get a chance to do that, you can step in and say, here's some things we could do relatively easily that could really streamline the class, okay? And I'm betting you that they will be very happy to hear that. So, all right. Now, we could go on. Yes, Michael.
I was going to say, too, on the one we were just looking at on slide 3, it looked like they just copied and pasted some text from like a Word document. And trying to read that in class would be really hard. It looked like they had a ton of text thrown in, and then just some of them highlighted in blue. So yeah, I just thought that would be really hard for a student to pick up in that first day of lecture. Right.
Well, they're probably making those slides available, I'm guessing. And you may have seen, because what I'm trying to do is not go to slides, because it's a lot of overhead to copy things on the slides. But I like using Google Docs, because then I can share them easily. I can add hyperlinks. It's just very nice for the most part for what I want to do. So it's not ideal, but I think it works. But a lot of faculty just haven't used it enough to feel comfortable. So it's asking them to switch to Google Docs might be a little bit much, right? They're not going to do that, especially now that the semester started. But just saying, hey, here's some ways we can help the students out, and some information that we can provide, and just things that would make your life easier. Then don't be afraid of sharing that. Okay. And be prepared. They might say no. Okay, that's fine. And accept that, but that's okay. It's a prerogative, but don't get upset. But it's just saying that, hey, constructively, I have some thoughts. And remember the compliment sandwich. Really like this course. The topic is really interesting, etc. Students are excited. And then give them a little critique, and then give them another compliment. Okay? So communicate. Here's that's the biggest thing, is like, just don't be afraid to communicate with the instructor. You as a GSI are in a very unique position, and you're being asked to really do a lot of lifting. So it's fine to do that, because you are going to get evaluated at the end of the semester. You're going to get a course evaluation, which is our next topic. So what I want to do now is, I'm going to look at your other responses, and I think it's a good exercise for those of you who haven't done it. Please do so. But being able to pull out a syllabus and now look at it from a critical eye of, okay, how would I change this? And it's really helpful, because as you're starting to think about, at some point, you'll be writing your own syllabus and thinking about what works, what doesn't, and what to include. Okay, good. Now let's go to the course evaluation. Now I want to share with you that the course evaluation is a little risky business, and it's a very special thing, and it's one of the hard facts of life to being a professor, which is you get this evaluation. Now, you're going to get one too as a GSI, okay? And I want you to know about it, and don't be surprised at the end of the semester if it's the first time you're teaching. The fact is that it is oftentimes a mixed. You get mixed responses, and so you should know what the kind of questions are going to be. And what I put on that early evaluation are very typical questions that come out of the Berkeley the Berkeley course evaluations. And you've seen them as a student, but if it's your first year as a grad student, you might not know what Berkeley's formats are, et cetera. But they're asking you to rate on a scale of 1 to 7 on some questions, 1 to 5 on other questions. And they're really trying to get at a sense of how well you performed. And what I find very helpful is to ask students do this either early or middle of the semester to get some gauge of how things are going so far. Now, it's helpful because if there's a real problem and you're really screwing up on some dimension, it's really helpful to know. And so I recommend, and I've done it in all my classes since I started teaching, but I just put it out there as a way of getting some feedback early on. Because, by the way, at the end of the semester, it's too late, right? You've already, you're already. In fact, actually, it's worse than that. Generally, in the way it used to be, course evaluations were not available until months after the class was over. Partly it was because of just bureaucracy. The paper had to be collected anonymously, and then it was all transcribed, and then you got these evaluations literally like up to 6 months after the class was over. More recently, they've gone to an electronic system, and by the way, that was a hugely controversial decision to go electronic, and we can talk about why, but that...
Was it because of like anonymity, or?
No, it wasn't anonymity, but it was a fear that by making it very easy to fill out the form for students who didn't attend the class very often, that they would be more critical.
I see.
So students, I will tell you, faculty care a lot about this. Oh, I should tell you, promotion committees care a lot about this. And they look at them very carefully. So when you go up for promotion and tenure, for example, they will look at these comments, and there'll be some in there you'll be like, ouch, I can't believe a student said that. And they will literally quote that student in your otherwise glowing report, and there'll be one thing that one cranky student wrote about you once, and that's in there, and then you got to kind of answer for that. So number one, realize that you are on, you are being judged from the first minute you walk in. And if you have a bad day and you kind of harsh out on a student or something like that, I can tell you from experience that you will pay for that. That student will remember it and come and get even with you at the end of the semester. So don't, really be professional. Sometimes the students can be frustrating, or you just had a bad day, but you cannot take it out of them. They have a very, it's just ethically, you have a position of power. We're going to talk more about that later, but you're also, in a position where you are expected to be professional at all times. And so really keep that in mind. Just remember about these evaluations, because they are going to come and they will be taken seriously. So the other thing I want to also share with you is that they are rarely uniformly glowing. Okay, so you have to have a thick skin when you read these. Okay, and don't expect everybody to be, it's all love and roses. It's a mix. Some students are gonna like you, and some students are not gonna like you, and some students are gonna be irritated by different aspects. A lot of times you'll get very contradictory feedback, like this class, the pace is too fast, and someone else will say the pace is way too slow. So you can't please everyone. That's important to keep in mind. And you're going to make decisions that some students are just not going to like. This is we didn't do this efficiently. We could have been doing these things better, right? Professor, didn't show up for office hours. I mean, all kinds of things like that, right? Professor was late to class. Okay, it could have been just once. But if you're late to class, you're gonna probably hear about it. Okay, I'm just warning you. I just want you to know, like, it is amazing the scrutiny that you'll be under. Right? Professor made fun of a student once. You didn't mean it, but you were joked around about a student question, and bang, you didn't offend that student, but another student took offense, and they're going to write about it. So what I want to say is, just feel as though you essentially are under a little bit of a microscope, and you will be. That's just a part of the process. Okay. Generally, we try to take it into account. I always felt that you should be able to basically throw out the outliers. Like, you should be able to pick 3 or 10% of the evaluations and just discard them. Like, that would, to my mind, I always thought that would make sense, because there's always a few cranky students and they're going to really be negative. And so you should be able to take them off the table. I also think that the scaling system, the point, is really bad, because when they use the mean, it's terrible, but the median is better. But you just, when you get a few very low grades, because the scale is 1 to 5, most people are rating you pretty positively, so 4s and 5s. But one person who gives you a 1 is really going to pull your not only your average down, but your median down. Can pull down your median, right? A few people will give you lower grades. So I want you to just be aware of this. There's going to be some students who just decide they really don't like you, and maybe you remind them of somebody they don't like you remind them of your mother or something, their mother, and they just don't like you, and so they're gonna have it out for you from day one. So look, you can't get away from that. You're stuck with each other, and you're gonna have to get used to it. The thing I like about getting these early evaluations is it wakes you up a little bit. It's very helpful. So when I looked at your evaluations, the ones I've seen so far, they were good. They were positive, made me feel good, but also there were some negatives in there, and that's okay. It's helpful for me to know and get some sense of things that I wasn't thinking of and wasn't aware of. So that's really helpful. And I encourage you can do this on your own, by the way, is you could just take a copy of that evaluation. You're free to use it, modify it as you like, and then just hand it out in your class. Now, if you're on today, if you're on Zoom, you could do what I did, was put it on Zoom, and then I'm trying to think about how to make it purely anonymous. That's a little tricky, right? Because you want them to be honest, but you could have them.
It can be a Google form, like that doesn't log what the account is. I mean, it wouldn't be purely anonymous, but it would be close enough.
Yeah, I see. I see. So then everybody would share the same one?
No, if it was if it was just one of the Google forms, like the surveys, and then on the survey you get the option of whether you track the Gmail account or not.
Oh yeah. Okay. Yeah, actually, that's a great idea. So you could do it as a survey, and turn off the tracking, and then you get the anonymous survey. Yeah, that's a good idea. Good. It's helpful to do the anonymous because you really want people to speak freely. So anyway, just a thought, and you don't necessarily do it now. Because this is a class about teaching, I really wanted to do it very early so we could talk about it, but it's something you might do in a couple weeks. It's just helpful to get this information, maybe a month in or so, just so that you have a way to account if there's some problem that the students are upset about and you just didn't know, and you'll hear, okay, when they answer questions. All right. So thanks for filling that out. That was useful for me, and it's meant also as an instructive idea to suggest to you that you can do it in your classes. Okay, now let's switch over to the textbook, and I asked you to read chapter 4 in the book, and it's on objectives and textbooks itself. Now, course objectives are one of the sort of banes of faculty life, and because it just feels very weird to write them. But they are useful, and they're particularly are used in evaluations, accreditation evaluations. So it's useful to know what they are and how to write those. What will students know at the end of your class? So, here was they gave some examples like solve problem. It's a thermodynamics course. Solve problems using the first law. Solve problems requiring the use of the second law. Understand the limitations of thermodynamics, right? So these are pretty broad kind of objectives, but they're ideas that, you know, you step back and say, what should you learn when you come out of it? And the idea is that you're sort of thinking backward of like, okay, they finished the course. What did they learn? What can they now do? What are the new powers that they've gotten out of the class? And the chapter 4 also gives you a whole list of thermodynamics objectives, which is pretty helpful because you can take those and modify those for a lot of classes. And it's a good exercise. The other thing that they get into in this chapter, which I want to touch on, is these taxonomies of knowledge. And in particular, Bloom's taxonomy, which begins on page 49. Actually, I can share the screen. Well, let me just go over the idea. Just take another look at this one. It's, again, the textbook is available free online, so you can just grab it in PDF. But there are this set of 6 different levels of cognitive learning, thinking and knowledge. So it starts with a definition of knowledge, facts, conventions, definitions, etc. And so so you can have a knowledge objective, what you're going to know. Then there's comprehension statements. It's ability to comprehend or grasp the meaning of material, but not necessarily to solve problems or relate it to other material. Okay, so again, you can read the details on this, but you see the distinction. It's a little bit, I mean, if you just use common sense, you might say comprehension and knowledge seem identical, right? But what they're getting at here is that there is a way of thinking about these that's more fine-grained. Application is a use of abstract ideas in particular concrete situations. So where you can apply a particular set of equations or tools. Analysis is being able to break down a complex problem into parts. And so there's an analysis objective, that you know how to analyze a problem and break it up. Synthesis is the opposite, putting pieces together. So it may be a design, being able to, you have certain ingredients and you know how to combine them to put something together. And the last one is valuation. It's a judgment about a solution, process, design that is based on some internal criteria. So if you think about it, think about it as metrics. Do I know how to evaluate things and determine how well they work, for example, how well they perform? And minimizing error is obviously the biggest one, but you could look at a number of different ones. How can you, and particularly quantify evaluation? Okay, and the claim here is that Bloom's this taxonomy is a hierarchy, that it's you need to build up from you start with knowledge, you go to comprehension, then applications and analysis, and you need all that before you can do the synthesis. And then you need the synthesis before you can do the evaluation. Okay, so that's sort of helpful, I think, if you were ever asked to do a taxonomy and you know, for a class or objectives, that would be very helpful to consult, because you can look at this and you can go through, okay, what are the knowledge pieces, what are the comprehension, etc. And that would be, you'd be well on your way to being able to write a set of objectives. Does that make sense? Any questions? Okay. I'm going to skip this next part because it gets a little bit, I think it's a little less relevant. But there is a section that I want to touch on here, which is the textbooks. And I thought this was interesting because it's how to choose a textbook for your class. Now I know that if you're GSI, you're not in a position to choose the textbook often, but it's actually an interesting process. Partly because if you're teaching the class from scratch, the textbook is going to have a lot of effect on your teaching and on your students' experience. So you want to spend a good amount of time looking up textbooks, and it's a moving target because new ones come out all the time. So there's a discussion of should you use a textbook at all, and then there's about the selection process and how students tend to emphasize the textbook, right? That they believe the textbook is, gospel, and this is a common problem, as you all know, where people read a research paper and they think it's the truth, right? And we know better as grad students. But in a textbook, you want to really try to understand it. A big factor is accessibility. I mean, I have to say nowadays, I'm really striving for open access textbooks like this one, where you can get the full text for free, because it's just a burden on students to have to buy another textbook and carry one around. It's nice to be able to just grab it on a PDF and work with it. And it brings up a point that I saw in someone had written in the evaluation, which I really appreciate. Someone pointed out to me, which I did not see before. But in terms of textbook, someone pointed out that there was actually something that was offensive about this very textbook that we're using in the class. Now, I will show it to you now. Now, I will share my screen. Let me go back here. This is actually in chapter 1, which I assigned the first week. And I'm going to zoom in on it. It's on page, if you can pull it up, it's on page 2 of chapter 1. But let me see. How do I share screen? Okay. Okay, can you see that? I'm going to make it bigger. Here we are. Okay, this is chapter 1 of our textbook I chose for you for this class. And this is the section in question that a student flagged. And when I went back and looked at it, I think it's a really good point, and we should talk about it. So let me say, well, the student who wrote this is welcome to speak up if they want to, but I'm just going to, if not, I can just describe what it is. But let's look at this sentence in here. It says, the problems of engineering education have changed. That the number of traditional engineering students, okay, let's just flag that, white male 18-year-olds, okay, is expected to go through a minimum from 1992 to 1994, and then increase very slowly. Okay, in order to have enough engineers to remain internationally competitive, we must recruit, teach, and retain non-traditional students, such as women and underrepresented minorities. There's also a moral imperative for reaching out to these non-traditional students. So, and they offer different challenges and require different educational methods. Okay, a related problem is how to encourage enough US citizens, particularly women and minorities, to earn PhD and become educators. Okay, many students, well, let's stop there. Okay, so it's an interesting point, and I have to admit, I did not zero in on this, and when I was reading it, but now looking at it again, I see why it can be offensive. Does anybody else want to have any topics you want to read there? I mean, I think it's fairly obvious, right? This is very old school type of mentality. It's written by, 2 white males, I presume. This was written in the 80s. And they're, this whole characterization of traditional engineering students is offensive. I mean, why, sort of now establishing that that's a tradition and everything else is, quote, non-traditional. Right? That language itself is really problematic because it really sets up that someone is non-traditional if they're a woman or underrepresented minority, so they're not part of the tradition, right? And that's bad enough, but then they say that I think their intention is somehow good. We want to recruit and retain these non-traditional students, but we have to reach out because they offer different challenges and require different education methods, okay? Really problematic. I mean, that to say that is packed with assumptions and you know, a very strong bias that you have the white male 18-year-olds who are going to be learning this way, and then all these other students are being, you know, somehow put in a different category, right? Anyone else feel bothered by this?
I flagged the comment to you. I'm like totally fine saying that. I stand by my comment.
Good. Okay, thank you.
I mean, the non-traditional part, like, yes, obviously I'm a woman and I identify as one, and having that non-traditional title, I don't love, but I'm used to it. I think that's something I've dealt with my whole life in this field. Not to say that it's right, but fair enough, I guess. It's something that has to change over time. But I think what really bothered me is the fact that they kind of push it further, and they're like, those non-traditional students offer different challenges and require different educational methods. And I guess I kind of wanted to flag it because I think, like, we're all learning to be better teachers, whether we're formal GSIs or just, you know, interacting with our peers and teaching each other that way. And I just didn't want it to be something that people kind of just gloss over and are like, oh yeah, okay, like in the back of my head, that'll just stick in there, that maybe like when I'm talking to a non-traditional student, I might need to do things a little bit differently. It didn't sit right with me, I guess. So that's kind of why I flagged it.
Yeah, no, and I'm so glad you did. Thank you, Claire. I mean, it was actually really interesting because I think you're 100% correct. And
I was just gonna say, I think, like, I mean, I've continued to read the book, and I think their points are valid. Like, I think they have a lot of good suggestions throughout the book. I think it's just, this was the one section where I was just like, I feel a little cringy and I don't like it.
Can I add on to that as well? Would also, like, I essentially said everything that was going through my mind as well, but I think my main issue with this is that they're kind of putting, as what you were alluding to, they put the non-traditional students kind of on a lower level. They're like, they require different educational methods because these ones that we do now are not, like, they won't be able to handle that. And you did say that it's something that we do deal with as women in an engineering field, and I feel like it is because of, like, things like these not being called out. So going forward, it needs to be called out, I guess.
It needs to be called out. Good. Yes.
Something else that really stands out to me is when they say that there's also a moral imperative for reaching out to the non-traditional students. It sort of assumes a moral ground. Like, it assumes it takes the position that it's something that comes out of morality for this to happen, even though this should be the norm and this should be the convention, and it's not. It should be common sense. I don't know. I might be cherry picking at this point. I think we all sort of understand what's going on there, but I think a lot of times, I think in my position, speaking as, I don't know, a semi-international student or somebody who comes from, like, an underrepresented minority or ethnicity, it sometimes feels like it's when statements like this sort of make it seem like a favor is being done when these resources are provided to these students, that sort of lessen the position of these people and lessen the credit that they deserve for all of the work that they've done to, like, get to the position where they are, and not acknowledging that, like, an example, like, the workload might be a little different or the requirements might be a little different, but the challenges and the struggles along the way are all sort of unique to getting to that. And I feel like putting it under the umbrella of a moral imperative is very problematic because of that.
Yeah.
No, I
Salim, sorry.
Go ahead.
So, like, Salim, you also kind of alluded to being, like, a semi-international student, and I was a little bit confused as to why they were pushing, like, a little bit of a nationalistic kind of perspective here, that, you know, we need to find US citizens to be competitive and have them become educators, right? Like, at Berkeley, we have a lot of people who are not from the US, and we still want to educate them equally. So I'm not sure why that was necessary in this passage.
I think, drawing the line between international and national is just a blurry line in general. And I feel like that is so outdated at this point. I don't know.
Okay. All right, hold that thought, Salim, and if you could lower your hand on the list here, because Ryan is up next.
Yeah, so
okay, go ahead, Ryan.
I just wanted to make the small like observation that it also is suggesting that this integration of minorities is sort of just in a response to a drop in the number of white male engineers. And that's just inherently like not a good thing. Like it's like a response. Yeah, pretty much just that. Like the fact that it's a response to the more qualified, it seems like they're implying. Like
Right.
just the fact that it's a response is wrong.
Good. You guys are nailing it. This is really good. This is exactly what I was hoping you would do, which is, I think you're starting to understand all the loaded aspects of this that are coming through very loud and clear. Yeah, that there is a sense of, okay, we have this problem, and the U.S. must remain competitive, and so we're going to have to also go and get these other students, right, instead of our traditional students. There's a tone that's definitely present here, and I don't think anyone's imagining it. It's definitely there, and I think it has a nationalistic aspect. The moral, bringing up the moral imperative is really interesting, because that's kind of, I think also like there's some, you can read that as a sort of very supremacist kind of perspective, right? That this is the moral imperative, right? They are gonna be the one to arbitrate that, and it really has this tone of superiority, condescension, right? I mean, this idea like we're gonna, these non-traditional students, they require for different challenges and require different educational methods. I mean, what is that saying? As though the traditional students, their so-called white male students don't have challenges, right? Like they're holding them up in some bracket. Yeah, I think it's really good to be aware and catch something like this.
Could I say something real quick? Or?
Yeah, please, Claire, go ahead.
I just wanted to, or I had a question about that. I've just read a few papers on like the leaky pipeline type thing, and they do call out specifically like that we need more or different ways of instructing or providing more assistance to minority students and underrepresented groups, because like their experiences are different. As an example, like women, when we were growing up, we might not be given like the same toys to play with. Like that's just kind of one example. Like we're not stimulated. This is generalizing, of course, but like the toys that we're given aren't stimulating like our geometric, visual, and geographic reasoning, and so we're like not as good as math. Like that kind of type of socializing, I guess, has like created problems like that.
Sure.
And I was just wondering, like, I mean, this is a really lofty goal for one paragraph, right? Like, of course, like the beginning part is very flawed, but that one statement, when they're going in those different challenges in educational methods, they don't really cover it and don't give any supporting arguments or anything. So I think that's a problem. But I was just wondering if we were going to go into that, and actually address that issue of addressing people's different needs.
Absolutely. And we will. And that's actually, I'm glad you asked, because we're definitely going to talk about that. We're going to talk about learning styles, and we're also going to we're going to talk about diversity a fair amount. And for example, what you're talking about, we have to be really, I think, especially, aware that even that binary gender characteristic, right, of, girls versus boys is problematic and loaded itself. The talk about the leaky pipeline, statistically there's a factor that that was reported. I can't remember the exact numbers on this, and I'll look it up for you. But the number of gender identified girls who say they like science and math, the perfraction between the ages of something like 8 and 13, like dramatically drops. And that's been reported many, many times. So why is that? There's a lot of theories and speculation, and we can talk about it. But it's partly that there's a lot of social pressures that are just structural in our society, and we have to think about those and try to actively be aware of them and counteract them, so that we give opportunities to everyone. So exactly, and I think here's the thing is, I think that these there's a good intention here. There was an attempt. I think this paragraph, when they were writing it, they were trying to say, we want to be inclusive. We want to bring in more people. But from our perspective in 2020, it was very clumsy. And it shows a pretty big lack of awareness of what's really going on. So, but the road to hell is paved with good intentions, right? That's the cliche. It's true. You might be intending to do something good, but you might accidentally, it might backfire. So I want for us all to be aware of this. This is why teaching is complicated, and you're going to encounter this in many different ways in your classrooms. And that's one of the things we're really going to talk about in this class, because I find it's just something that rarely gets talked about, and it comes up many times, and I've been on a big learning curve about it. And so I'm open to your ideas and suggestions, and I really appreciate that this came up and that we can talk about this right here in our own textbook. So I apologize to you guys in the sense of, I should have flagged this before. I didn't see it, and I should have warned you that it was in there, which I will do in the future. And I do think that this is exactly the kind of insensitivity that we want to be sensitive, that we want to learn how to deal with. Okay. All right.
Can I just add one more thought on
Yeah.
that?
Thanks, Clara.
Sorry, I just also wanted to add that yes, this was a different time, and I can recognize that. And I think nowadays some people, I think at least like at Berkeley, we try to be a little bit more inclusive, at least on the surface. I don't think it always works out that way, but I think it's kind of those inherent biases that we all have that I think can come out accidentally sometimes. Like, I don't think anybody would directly say that I think you need to be educated differently, but I've certainly had it implied by several of my GSIs in my education. And so I just think, like, trying to take a step back when we are teaching other students and just kind of thinking about, okay, like, what are my biases here, and like, what can I maybe do differently, or how to approach a situation? Just take a minute, think about it. Nothing's going to be solved overnight, but that's just my 2 cents.
Absolutely, thank you. And I agree completely. That's actually so important on all fronts, because it's going to be, it can be about gender and the spectrum of gender. It can be about race. It can be about language. It can be class. It can be a disability, ability level, right? There's so many different aspects in which we may not be as sensitive to where someone's coming from. And I think it especially comes up when a student isn't understanding something and they come to you and they want you to explain something, and you've explained it like 3 times and it was covered in the lecture, and you're like, well, come on, what do you, we covered this. And I understand that, because I know myself, I'm not the most patient person in the world. I'm working on it. But being able to step back and say, what's going on? That student did not have the privileges that you had, may not have that quick lightning mind and great memory that you were blessed with, or didn't grow up in an environment where they were nurtured in the same way, right? Or they just didn't take a particular prerequisite. I'm coming back to Salim's point. And they just don't they didn't have that background. So you can't judge them harshly if they're really just not understanding, if they're making the effort. So that's a really good lesson. And I think, you know, we are going to come back to this. It's going to be a recurrent theme in this class, is how do we sensitize ourselves to that? It's going to make us a better instructors, GSIs, and also this comes back to my other thesis, which is I think it's going to make you a better researcher, a better colleague, and probably a better friend too. But all right. So thank you for that. Let's now. It's already quarter after 5, and what I was thinking about is ways to speed up on the chalk talks, and I have the list from last week of who had their hands up. So I have I'll just name them. It's Enze, Yuhang, Isaac, Christopher, Michael Kelly, Zinab, Vishal, Rashid, Preston, Anthony. These are hands that were up. Now I don't know if you've gone or not, but I'm going to go in this order. Here's what I'm thinking. And I'd like to keep doing a few more because I think it's good to do them as a class, but let's try and we'll go faster. And then what I'm thinking is we might do an experiment where I'd like to try breaking up into rooms and let you, and maybe we'll pair up people to do them together. Does that sound okay? For some? Okay. So let's go on. Enze, did you go yet?
I have not.
Okay, are you ready to?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So now, let me ask if someone would help me with the timing, because that's not my strong point anyway. So does anybody have a little digital clock that they could just set a timer at 1 minute and 30 seconds or so?
I can do it.
Who's that? Salim again? Okay, great. Salim, you did it last week. Thank you for doing it again. What I'd like you to do is just say 30 seconds warning, and then I'll keep track and we'll try to wrap it up. If he gives you 30 seconds, try to finish up on time, okay? And then I'll keep that. Partly why we spent much longer time last week was we had a lot to cover of examples and things to talk about. Now we're covering most of them already, so we should be able to move faster. All right. So Enze, you want to share your screen with us? Salim, you could start the. Yes, we see it. You're all ready. Good to go. All right, Salim, you ready to go?
Yep.
All right, please begin.
Cool. Hi, everyone, and welcome to this class where we're going to learn how to see atoms with invisible light. So my name is Enze. It's spelled E-N, Z-E. And to help you remember the pronunciation, you can just look at the middle 2 letters, so N-Z. And to help motivate this topic, I want you to think back to your introductory biology class where you looked into a light microscope and saw live cells for the very first time. I don't know about you, but I think it's pretty cool that we can see the things that we are studying, even when those things are really small. Here in material science, we want to do the same, but because we're studying atoms, which are really, really small, we can't see them using visible light. The reason for that is because visible light, as you know, is this wave that's part of the electromagnetic spectrum. So let me just label that.